Well, hello, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, Michael. Yes, very, very good. Thank you. It's so good to see you. You're looking very good and healthy and tanned and well, which is lovely to
Oh,
see.
well, yeah, we've eventually got for anyone who's listening, I'm in North America at the moment. I have an American wife, and so we're held up in Massachusetts in the countryside, and spring has been very long and slow. We've only had good weather for about the last 3 days. And so now spring is finally kicking in. It's always slightly later than the UK's, I guess, because of all that globe business and angle of the earth. But no, so summer's kicking in. Yeah, I'm well, thank you. You look well. Nice to see you in your
Yes, we've
studio.
been very, very good. Yes, I'm currently in my studio, so I'm based in Buckingham, in the sort of middle of England, and I popped into the studio. I'm able to sort of still come into work, which is good. But we're the opposite. We are having glorious weather. In fact, I think we're in week 7 now of being on this sort of lockdown and quarantine, and the
Yeah,
weather has been predominantly fantastic this whole time, which has been a bit of a mixed blessing. Some people find it frustrating that they can't fully utilize the weather, whilst I'm one of them that actually enjoy that I can get out in the garden, and whether that's being with my family or even doing tasks and gardening outside is quite nice to actually get outside and not feel trapped on
yeah.
the
I know
inside.
you've got a couple of young kids, haven't you? How old are they again?
So I've got a daughter who's 8 and a son who's 5. So they're I'm sort of busy juggling that mixture of trying to run my business and my company and trying to produce art and trying to do a bit of homeschooling at the same time. And sometimes a ball drops and I have to pick it up, and it is particularly difficult and challenging. It's a rotten business, this whole thing that we're all experiencing in the crisis. And I know so
Yeah,
many of my artistic friends in the art world community globally how devastating it is being on the arts in general, for in regards to events happening and things being cancelled, and then
yeah,
quite likely livelihoods and worriness being out there.
yeah. I speaking in terms of how much paint people consume. Obviously, our mail order clients have been going quite ballistic, as everyone's taking the opportunity to get material sent to their homes, which is a redeeming factor. I feel sorry for, of course, the businesses, the various shops around the UK and other places which don't have mail order internet presence, because they're in a dire situation, I'm sure, as many other shops are, and we don't seem to be really seeing any proper light at the end of the tunnel yet.
No, I mean, so I'm the director of an art school here at Claydon Estate in Buckinghamshire, and I run a series of courses, and I get other artists from across the globe to come and teach. And of course, all the courses that were scheduled for this year, of course, needed to be cancelled and postponed, which of course is terribly disappointing for the people who were travelling all over the world to come and attend these courses. But of course, it's particularly devastating for the artists themselves, who they've lost a huge chunk of income. And then for me, as the director of the company, I'm
Yeah,
navigating through very uncertain times of when these restrictions will be lifted, because we are a luxury entity and what we're providing. And of course, what we provide is all about social interaction and communication and people being together. There are ways that some of us are getting around that by using this wonderful technology, but it certainly is no substitute for being face to face with talented individuals and being inspired and created. So
yeah.
we are, we're concerned that we think we can ride through this storm with the appropriate support, but there is a lot of uncertainty in this, and I know that's causing a lot of concern, for me, but a lot of the wider artists out there.
Yeah, of course, from a economic point of view, if people aren't earning money to be able to go and either buy paintings or commission paintings, and that whole follow through of professional artists earning a living, therefore, that knock-on effect, of course, takes quite a while probably to come through, but it will.
Mm.
And so, apart from my point of view, that the section of the community that paints for a leisure will probably be our only bread and butter, I would think, if we keep going like this, because naturally the professional artists, if their source of revenues I've just explained dries up, of course that means they grind to a halt and spend their money on other things they need more, like food.
Mm.
So yeah, that's yeah, it's hard to follow it through, and it gets very dark and depressing, I have to say, when you try and
I know
follow.
a lot of people, myself included, particularly the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of when this all started and kicked off, that any type of creative interest and drive just ran complete dry, and I had no impulse to paint anything. You know, how can you paint something beautiful and with meaning and thought and craftsmanship and awareness when you feel like you've got the whole weight in the world on your shoulders and there's these more important things taking place?
I mean, as most people know, I'm also an artist. I don't function painting every day, not surprisingly, with the paint making business. I, like you, have been locked down now. We're in our 8th week. It was seven weeks yesterday, and I've only really started painting the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I've been really getting into it, I have to say. I think I've entered in my own head this sort of surreal lifestyle now. You know, we're living in the countryside, so you know, we've got nice countryside around us, and we've got a river at the bottom of the garden, and as I said, spring's finally happening here, and so you know, I can get out and walk around, and we've done lots of moving around of rocks and cutting timber and stuff like that. But now I am painting. In fact, I've got a lot of stuff that the big mail order company here, Blick, is meant to be sending me any day now, a whole roll of watercolor paper and more brushes. And I even had to call up my own American distributor here and get some of my own acrylic primer sent to me, which was much to their because I'm doing a nice big painting. It's a 48 by 32 inches oil.
Wow.
On Thursday, and as soon as the primer arrived, it was straight on the canvas. And yeah, so I'm really getting into the painting, I'm pleased to say. And I have psychologically gone into a very sort of strange zone. It's like in some ways it feels like a never-ending Christmas. You know, that sort of those post-Christmas, between Christmas and Boxing Day and New Year's, you always go into this timeless zone of like, what day is it? I've gone into that. And I also joke often, I now know how Julian Assange must have felt when he was held up in that apartment in that embassy. I can't remember which one, the Uruguayan or whichever one it was, for several years. And although, you know, you're treated in comfortable circumstances, your own home, with food and wine and all those niceties, but with a sort of an invisible cordon around you, it's most strange.
Well, I think in many ways we are the lucky ones, us creative individuals, because we have that thing inside us. This eventually, hopefully, this urge to create will come. Yeah. And there are lots of people out there who do not have that sense of purpose. Whereas, you know, artisans, makers, craft people, and artists, we do have this innate thing inside us where we need to react, we need to respond, and we need to create. Yeah. Whether it happened from the start or whether it's taken a few weeks or even over a month to kick into it. So I do thank my lucky stars. I do have my creative side to sort of lose myself in and discover another world where I can forget about the real world sometimes.
I suppose you could also term it as being able to be an escapist within oneself, which is pretty useful. Yeah, I think artists anyway are quite self-sufficient with what goes on within their own heads. I mean, I'm not into sports. I'm not one of these guys where I'm missing kicking a football around a field with my 21 other friends or something. It doesn't work for me, never has. But, you know, countryside is one of my great loves. I love nature. I love looking at things, obviously, which is, I guess, the first step to being an artist and the artist process. So, yeah, we've got pretty countryside around us, so I'm spoiled at the moment. Yeah, but thinking about anyone else who might be listening, I suppose everyone's sort of sharing in their own heads, yeah, that's like me, or no, that's not like me sort of moments. And let's hope the positive thing is that, yes, a lot of people out there are doing a lot of painting and hopefully stirring up a lot of interest they haven't had before and asking questions. And great old internet, of course, is probably, Google must be utterly exhausted.
Yes.
All the questions being pumped in and all the searches. But thank goodness we've got these tools. If it had been sort of 25, 30 years ago, it would be a different story.
Yeah, well, I've transferred a lot of what I do over to the internet, and it has been a saving grace, and particularly for communicating with other artists, because we tend to be relatively lonely individuals, so it is a wonderful way to connect. Yeah. So this puts me onto a good point, because when we announced that we were going to have this conversation, I put some calls out there for people to write some questions, right. Because I thought now is an opportunity to sort of speak directly to you. So I've got a list of questions that I'd like to put to you to see if you can sort of give us a little bit more information. Sure. So the first one is a very, very simple one. I think it's something that a lot of people tend to be quite afraid of, and it's why oils? what do oils have that, say, particularly, I think it's often compared to acrylic. What makes oils so different, and why some artists like myself would say is a superior medium to a lot of the other materials out there? What's your point of view on that?
It's just one of those touchy, lovely, feely things for me. I remember the first time I felt inspired to paint in oils. I walked into an exhibition at the Marl Galleries, London, and there was this painting that I think it was a young person's exhibition. This is way back in the 1970s. And there's this beautiful painting this girl had done of a witch holding a skull. And it was superbly painted for my eyes at that age. I'd have been probably about sort of 11 or 12. But there's also this smell. And it's like the fresh baked bread thing inspiring you to cook. And visually, I just found the intensity that only oils can create. I mean, you're painting effectively with a stained glass window. It's that sort of fruit velocity. The good thing about oils is that you can get a very high pigment load, so the color intensity is there. As I understand it, I don't make acrylics, although I make an acrylic primer, as most of you will know. You don't have as much pigment in an acrylic paint, because an acrylic paint is very much more of a cocktail. You have to have other ingredients in there to stabilize the system in many ways. And I know, for instance, in oils, we often get pigment loads way up into the sort of 70s and 80% level. So that therefore means that amount of color that's actually physically there in front of your eyes will have that visual impact, which then sends those messages off through the optic nerve to the brain. And an acrylic can't get that load. That's, for me, the fundamental thing. And then, of course, you can talk from an artistic point of view. Some people, designers who are working in studios, and time is a consideration. And then, of course, has to have something dry in, say, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it might be. And if that works for you, plow on, get on with it. For me personally, when I paint with oils, I like the fact that I can revisit an area of paint and remobilize it, blend it. Most of the time, paint will still remain slightly open 24 hours later, or even days later, depending on the thickness, of course. So that's, there's drawbacks and there's virtues in either mediums. But for me, it's just that fruity, luscious, thing visually about oil paint that nothing comes close.
I love how you've used a lot of descriptive language that we often associate with food. And I'm quite similar. I often describe, colours being delicious, and you just want to pick it up and feel it, the tactility of it. And it has a sculptural, textural quality, which for me I love, where you can really lay it on in a sculptural manner, which I don't think you can really match that at all with acrylic, unless you're putting so much more additives and mediums to it.
I remember quite a few years ago, I was giving a talk at the Chelsea Arts Club, London, and a lady, as I was being introduced to give the talk, a lady called out, "I love your paints, I just want to bath in them." And I just thought, oh wow, this is quite something. And but I don't recommend it, everyone, so please don't. We can have loads of conversations about paint on skin, but it's one of those things that, if it's not necessary to get on your skin, I urge you not to do it.
No. Well, a few other people wanted to find out specifically more about the paint tubes themselves and the specialty of them. One interesting question was, first of all, where do you source the pigment, the actual colour that you bind with the linseed oil and other mediums to bring it together?
They literally come from numerous sources all over the world. Of course, probably the most exotic is the lapis lazuli, which is dug from mountains in Afghanistan. I don't go there myself and dig it up. Not surprisingly, Afghanistan's not on my bucket list right now, although I love travel. So that comes via various agents who get that for me. And as I say, I don't physically go and get that one. The majority of the other pigments come from some quite big industrial companies, and sort of, other paint makers will also be using those same sources. A lot of German industrial groups, like the big industrial group BASF, there's numerous pigment manufacturers around the world, and those big industrial companies make sort of chemicals for various industries anyway. So you'll often find that I'm using exactly the same pigments as other manufacturers. You get a lot of Italian earths dug out of the ground, and so again, probably from the same sources. You get specific pigment companies in places like Italy and France who are set up in business and quarry the natural earths. one or two other more exotic ones. I do a rose madder, of course, which is made from a plant root, the Rubia tinctorium. That's grown in Europe, and that pigment is made for me. The only pigment that I actually physically make myself, of course, is the stack lead white one. And yeah, that's probably got the most exotic, well, not exotic, but strange history. I know you'll know because you visited my colour mill, Peter. We make that by suspending lead over vinegar and burying it under horse poop. And that's the ancient way of making it. And I think it was the Dutch in something like the 13th century started to understand a little bit of the alchemy which was taking place there. And the essence of that is that in a sort of lay chemist's point of view is that the vinegar has acetic acid in it, which corrodes the surface of the lead, so you get a lead acetate. And then the horse poop's got the highest level of carbonic acid of all the animal poops. And this is the point you realize I'm not joking. So then there's a secondary reaction where the lead acetate is converted to a lead carbonate, and that is a white powder. So I actually make that, and it's a very arduous and time-consuming thing. It takes several months, of course, to corrode the lead. If you measure it visually, when you see lumps of iron rusting, corroding, and of course it has those sort of orangey brown colors. With lead, it tends to corrode and go white. And of course, the ancient guys who were at a loss to find white pigments, which was long-lasting and stable, they noticed this, and of course then thought, oh, this is rather useful. We can use it decoratively, and that's how it sort of ended up being used in painting.
So then, following on from that, so people, these different pigments, and therefore the way that you bind them together, which I presume mostly is linseed oil, is the oil of choice that you bind these pigments together. Each paint has a different sort of property and what it can do. And somebody asked, can you explain a little bit more, what's the difference, or what is transparency and opacity, which tend to be a kind of one of the key factors that many artists look for when they're considering buying a tube of paint?
Yeah, I mean, obviously oil paints really come into their own from the transparent colors like ultramarine blue or alizarin crimson, because they're, as I said, literally stained glass windows. Of course, you can make something opaque just by dropping a bit of white into it. Now, what makes a pigment transparent is usually decided by the particle shape and size. Obviously, the smaller the particle and the more uniform, it allows more light to pass through in a more uniform way. In simple lay terms, but then again, you can have very, very small particles of pigment which are also opaque, and it's a question of allowing the light waves to actually go through the pigment particles as well. Imagine this: if you look at a window, of course, it's physically a physical thing; it's there, and you can imagine that if you were able to hit it in a certain way, hypothetically with a hard object, some glasses, for instance, then become frosted, and that's therefore because the light is now not allowed to pass through in a uniform way. As it as the light waves go through the various changed angles of the fractures, it of course deflects light in a different way, and so you get that frosting effect, and that's why glass hypothetically would be cloudy. And so you could say that's a very quick way to convert something to being opaque.
And opaque is something that you can't see through, just in layman terms.
Yes, and you tend to then therefore experience it more with light bouncing off it rather than going through it. I mean, of course, the pre-Raphaelites had systems of painting sometimes where they would paint, you'd have a white ground, and over the white ground you'd have transparent colors. And then, of course, they get the double bubble because the light is going through the paint, hitting the white surface below them, coming back out, and then coming to your eye. So that's why you get those roller fruity, I keep saying stained glass window effects, rather than just striking the surface of the paint and coming off that surface in one bounce, as it were. So it's the physics of it, and of course it's the way that it transmits light or does not transmit light. As we get onto the very complicated subject about what color is, and of course what we actually see when we experience color is what it is not, rather than what it is. So, I mean, I won't try and, that's a much more complicated conversation for another day from people with better experience in talking about that than me. I mean, I know it, but it's not something that I feel in a position to start. I'm not going to start talking to people about color theory today. It wouldn't be fair.
No, that's fine. So I think because on your tubes, you clearly write, don't you, the property of the paint and what it can do and where its strength is as a pigment and what it's able to really achieve.
I mean, those descriptions on the side are really designed for the newcomers. Someone who's been painting a few years will automatically know that ultramarine blue is transparent and and it's drying. It's sort of average to slow dryer, depending on the thickness. So those little guides we put on the side are, if you're thinking about experimenting with a color you've never used before, or you're a newcomer to oil painting, and as Peter says, we put on there speed of drying, the oil content, whether it's low or high, what type of oil it is. And I'll be honest, a lot of the time I just put information there to arouse curiosity, to get you guys asking more questions, because I really believe Peter will know this, but the more I can prompt you all to sort of start asking questions about your materials and understanding them, therefore, with the answers, the better painters you will become. I often give the example that if you understand how your car engine works, you become a better driver. And I'm sure that's the case with painting. The better understanding you have of your materials, then you can just predict, and you can fly on autopilot more when you're painting then, having to think, oh, what's this going to do? Because you just automatically know how it behaves. And that makes you, I think, a more spontaneous painter.
I think these last 5 years, certainly my own personal creative practice has really developed because of I've really spent a lot of time focusing on the transparency and opacity of my colors. And as such, I've got a lot stronger paintings, and therefore they radiate so much color and intensity than they sort of did before, because I was not quite using them in the right way. So just by slightly just giving a little bit more consideration and time, the paintings look better. And now I'm on that sort of autopilot system where I can grab that right color for the right effect that I'm looking for.
Yeah. I think you have to make the materials your friends. If you're trying to make the material do something that it really isn't going to do, then you're fighting it, and that's another psychological barrier that you're having in your head as you paint. If they work with you rather than against you, then the whole painting thing is going to be far more fluent, and the whole creative. And it's all about what I call letting the magic come, because with this elusive thing called art that none of us really can put our finger on. It's one of those things, if you think about it, it goes away. If you don't think about it, it's present. So anything that can allow that presence to be, that magic to flow, I always feel is better. So like you're saying now, that you can just paint in a more, you don't have to think about it. It just sort of flows from you. And that's where you're going to get the magic.
Now, I travel around the country all the time doing a lot of demonstrations and workshops and encouraging and inspiring other people to paint, and as an ambassador of your paints, to sort of pick up and try your paints for the first time, and hopefully converting hundreds and hundreds of people to try your paints, because they really are superb. But there's a question I often get sort of asked back, and it tends to come from people who don't work in oils, and there is this concern and worry for the safety side of things, and the dangers and the worries and concerns that these paints supposedly have. So I wonder if you can sort of address some of these concerns, whether you think they exist or not, about the safety implications of when us artists, when we do work with oil paint.
Yeah, I mean, really, something can poison you if it gets inside you, so don't allow it to get inside you. Some people feel a lot more comfortable if they're wearing the nitrile gloves, and if that's okay, then fine. I mean, I don't wear the gloves, and I constantly get paint on my hands, but I make sure I jolly well clean my hands before I eat.
That's the same here. I don't do either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not terrified if I touch a lead white. I'm not going to be rushing off to the doctor to sort of just wash your hands and keep hands away from the mouth and so on if you are working in the studio. I think there's probably greater dangers from the mediums in terms of inhalation. Turpentine, genuine turpentines, that is, they can have a very, I love the smell of turpentine, but at the same time, I know it's one of those things that you should have a well-ventilated studio if you're using it. These odorless spirits as well, just because you can't smell it doesn't mean it's not there. So even with those, if you read the small print on those, they'll also tell you to ventilate your studios. Drinking those things inadvertently, of course, is potentially another hazard. I tend to try and advise people to keep things like this out of the, or be well disciplined. I think we've all done that thing where you're frantically painting away, and you've got your, you know what I'm going to say, you got your brushes,
Yeah.
and in the haste of the moment.
There, I don't want to take a shot of my espresso. It's actually a linseed oil in there. I want to make sure I get the right one.
Yeah, and you put your brush into your coffee cup, and then of course you swig your coffee a few minutes later, and immediately smell and detect or taste that you've had your brush in there. So that's easily done. Just, you know, keep food out of the studio. I think that people are probably a little bit neurotic where it comes to this. I get calls from, understandably, ladies who are pregnant, and they're concerned that even the smell of the paint might be a problem for them. Linseed oil itself, of course, is a health food supplement, and it's simply a vegetable sap. It comes from the flax plant. It's just pressed flax seed, so it's vegetable matter. That certainly isn't going to poison you, even if you drunk some linseed oil. It's not going to do you. I don't advocate it necessarily. I think people do use it, as I said, as a health food supplement. Turpentine, though, different matter. That's a potential poison. There's more other dangers out there in life. I mean, household bleach and vinegar mixed together produces poisonous gases, which potentially can kill you. So there's things in your kitchen anyway which could be dangerous. People go into shops and buy tobacco. 80 million odd people die a year, I believe, from smoking-related illnesses around the world. And yet I don't know any artist who's poisoned himself and died, or herself.
Yeah. I think it's you're right. It's pure common sense, and if it doesn't get inside you, you'll be fine. If you work with it in a common sense and safe manner, a well-ventilated space, and you haven't got food or drink by you, it is absolutely fine. Save, of course, if you have any ailments that it might provoke a skin reaction or a headache or something. Of course, then perhaps it's not the medium for you. But it's not a dangerous medium that I think some people label it as being.
No, I mean, there's some of you will have heard of the dangerous spontaneous combustion from linseed oil, and I'll talk a little bit about that. When you clean up paper towels, rags, stuff like that, the oil on rags has a chance of spontaneously combusting. It's the same thing that happens when a haystack bursts into flames. When linseed oil cures, dries, or whatever you like to call it, it produces a little bit of heat. And of course, more heat, more chemical reaction. You remember that from school chemistry days. And so it can cause a fire. In the near on 40 years I've been making paint, I've had 2 small fires. Please take it seriously. So every day, clean out your studio from those. If you clean up that way, your brushes and your palette, discard them in paper towels, rags, or whatever you're using into metal containers, and keep them wetted down, and whatever method you're going to use to dispose of them, get them out of your studios. That is a greater danger to the artist than anything else for obvious reasons. I have artists who talk about mysterious studio fires, and they say, I don't know what it was, and I say, well, I do. So, and it doesn't matter whether it's Michael Harding paint or one of the other paint makers, it's the nature of linseed oil.
I just get into that practice, as you said, that when I'm throwing something, I've got a metal bin, so it's completely contained, first of all. But then if I am looking and there is more linseed oil in my brushes and rags and paper towels than usual, I'll just get a little jug of water, and I'll just going to keep it nice and wet and nice and damp.
Yeah, and I mean, this really should be lesson number 1 before anyone's allowed to unscrew the cap of a paint tube, because that is, once you know it and are mindful of it, I won't say forget it, but you have it in there. It's part of your skills as an artist in terms of studio practice. Just get it out of the place. Particularly spring, actually. Both my fires were at spring. There's something to do with when things warm up and the air's a bit humid. It's always in the spring.
Well, let's move on to something a bit more positive and exciting. Now, there's a lot of excitement out there in the art world at the moment for some of these new products that you are in the middle of developing and have developed and are starting to drip feed out there. So there's first of all, the first question I got asked is about your acrylic based primers. Now, you've already explained you have already an acrylic based primer, a non-absorbent, which I think I've got here. Look at that already for you. It's this lovely stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Which is fantastic for, I use this and I put it on all the canvases. But I know you've started a range where you've started to add certain colours and tints to it. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and why you decided to offer this new range?
Well, actually, I was really led by people contacting me and asking me. Clearly, the most used would be white, not surprisingly, and a lot of people then have, I'm sure you do as well, Peter, you tone down your white canvas. Other people asked me if I was able to do that for them, or they'd contact me and say, can I add a little bit of acrylic paint to your acrylic primer without changing that non-absorbent nature, which I'll come to as to why it's called non-absorbent in a second. And yes, you can. Obviously, acrylic paints tend to be porous. Now, the reason for the other colours really is to sort of fast track that for you. We're going to be doing a couple of burnt sienna sort of shades, a sort of mossy green terre verte shade, because I've painted portraits and I tend to find that if I like a nice, certain colours just help you in your colour decisions and so on. And so it's also just having a little bit of fun. We're doing a clear, transparent one. So if you like the colour of linen, which a lot of you do because it's just a nice, neutral, biscuity, taupey shade, then that's quite sort of useful. So we're doing transparent.
I've got this one, which you very kindly sent me to have a little play with.
Oh yeah, the grey, neutral grey. It's yeah, that's another handy one. Again, a lot of portrait artists like that one as well, I found. Yeah, those will all be coming out. We'll probably be doing about 7 or 8 different shades.
Oh, wow.
They all have that same property, that they're non-absorbent. Now, my whole problem that I'd had to date with acrylic primers myself was that they tend to be porous, and they therefore suck the oil out of paint and leave it looking very dull. And the idea with the non-absorbent one is it interphases very well, so that your paint would adhere to it, but at the same time it's not so porous that it sucks all the oil out and leaving the paint looking dull. And I usually can, the telltale sign is because people will email me and go, how do I oil out with your paints, or do you do a retouch varnish? And I tell them, well, look, if you're needing those things, you're not using a non-absorbent acrylic primer, and then that could solve a lot of your needs straight away. And they normally go, well, how do you know? And I said, well, if your painting is going dull and matte, that's a giveaway, certainly. And they don't realize that they've been fighting that for years, because you'll get artists they'll paint 3 or 4 days, and by which time the colors are all sinking and going dull, and then they'll re-oil in, the oiling out, and of course you're also slightly compromising the potential for fat over lean problems at that point.
Yeah.
You're introducing clear layers then of linseed oil again, then potentially painting it over it with a lean paint, which is against the fat over lean principle. And so the acrylic primer we developed, it took us about 4 years to find the right sort of combinations of acrylic resins that do this. It doesn't drag all the oil out. So, as Peter will tell you, your paint almost looks wet like the day you painted it. And that's...
Yeah, you retain that rich, glossy lushness that the paint comes out the tube. And I noticed particularly with a lot of my dark earth-based colours, immediately after a day or so, you would just lose that lushness. And of course, like loads of artists, I would then revert to the varnishes to kind of rescue that back. And it's amazing how they still maintain that glossiness.
Yeah, no, earth colours, particularly the umbers, will tend to dry matte. It's just the natural nature of, say, burnt and raw umber to do that. The way I compromise as I paint is I just put a few more drips of oil in as I go with that, which just, if you like, over moistens them. So it's one of those things I know instinctively that I do. You could put a couple of drips of stand oil in as well, and stand oil tends to dry with quite a gloss to it. So it's another way of using it as a tool to reintroduce that sort of wet look, if you like.
So some people asked in regards to your non-absorbent acrylic primers. So could you use that your tub of non-absorbent acrylic primer and put it on a canvas that's already been primed that you may have bought from another manufacturer?
Yes, you could. What I do myself is for when I'm doing little test panels, I go and buy those, and I mustn't be nasty, but I'm going to be those terribly cheap, nasty little box sets, like 3 for 10 quid sort of things. and I just put one or two thin coats of my primer on those, and then I've got something which I can sort of just play around with, and I haven't had to go to all the expense of getting decent linen and priming it up and then sacrilegiously throwing it away because there are any test bits for me. Incidentally, another thing I found which is very useful for those cheap, horrible little canvas sets is the wooden stretchers are invariably fine. So what I do is I just rip all those horrible cheap canvases off and then re-stretch with proper linen, and that's the very good thing about those little sets. And then, of course, if you argue, well, they are terrible stretchers, Mr. Harding. Okay, well, if you find that you've painted a masterpiece, then you can swap the stretchers from underneath the painting, put it on a proper, proper, nicely jointed canvas, if you wish. Stretchers, bars, that is.
I often say when we work on materials like that, I tell my students that not to worry, you'll be giving art restorators of the future some work to do, so don't worry too much about it.
Oh yeah, the other thing I love saying to people is they say, is it okay to paint on household emulsion as a primer? And I go, yeah, absolutely, if you don't mind redecorating your painting every 5 years, because that's the industry standard for household emulsions. They expect you to be repainting your rooms every sort of 5 or 6 years. So I call it, redecorate your painting.
Can you use your acrylic primer on things like paper, watercolor paper or card?
You could do, but in a sense, you can buy papers already that are treated to be painted on with oils. I know Arches do one. If you then argue, well, okay, hang on a moment, a piece of paper isn't a very robust, long-term material to be painting on, why would you do that? Well, yes, watercolor paintings on paper are a vulnerable item anyway. It begs the question why you would do it. But yes, if you want a quick way of converting paper to be able to be used, cheap and cheerfully, yes, you can do that. I used to paint rabbit skin glue onto paper and just paint it normally. Another very fast, and as soon as it's dry, off you go. But it can be applied to many surfaces, Word panels, MDF, whatever you're choosing. Perfectly okay. 2 coats. Put a bit of water in the first coat if you wanted to get it to spread more easily. And I had behind me, you probably can see 1 or 2 paintings by Tim Rees. Tim Rees came to stay. He's an American artist, very, very good. Very detailed artist in terms of his preparation, and he gave me a bit of a telling off recently because he came to stay, and I produced a couple of canvases that I proudly primed in my non-absorbent acrylic primer for him. I said, "Here you are, Tim," and I expected him to go, "Oh, great, thank you." And the first thing he did, he started looking at the surface and said, "Have you got something I can just take it down with a little bit of sandpaper or pumice or something like that?" And he was going for literally, in my mind, it was a perfectly smooth canvas, but he just said, no, the slightest speck distracts me. He said, I have to have it perfectly warm. This is just the way I am. And then when I saw him start to we put another coat of the primer on for him just to satisfy his needs. And I realized the way he was looking at it, from different angles and then holding it up to the light, I realized that, dare I say, even I, as an artist who work, try and focus on my materials all the time, even I needed to be taught a lesson by him, because he said that level of preparation is so important for him. He has to have everything lined up perfectly before he embarks. I think, as you can see, there's the painting he did in the corner there of me he did that about. In fact, he did that 7 or 8 weeks ago, and I made the frame of it because I just wanted to get it up on the wall. It's one of the things I've done in my confinement. So yeah, and that's another one he did of my daughter a few years ago. A quick sketch, but no, he's a very accomplished and very, very pedantic, I suppose, in the right way. Pedantic in a good way, to get things absolutely right and prepared correctly. I think that's so important. This is why I always advocate, if you can stretch canvases and prime them and size them, whichever your method is yourself, please do. I think it's one of those things that just brings you closer.
Yeah, and you're right. His work is beautiful, really inspiring. So if you can follow him on Facebook or Instagram, I'd highly recommend that as well. So there's the other products that I know you're developing, which I know there's an enormous amount of excitement from me included. Is you are going to be producing a watercolor range of paints. Now, why on earth are you taking that brave decision to move from, you're known as the oil paint king. You're moving from oil-based to produce watercolors. First of all, why? And secondly, when can we get them?
Okay, yeah. We're looking at a range between 130 and 140.
Wow.
They are at the stage now where we've had them made up for about 2 years, and we're doing sort of the final sort of formulation test just to make sure the consistency remains from a storage point of view. Because as you can imagine, we put paint into tubes, and sometimes it can sit in a shop rack for months or years until someone picks it up, particularly if they replenish the stock from front to back, as it were, back to front. A tube can be there sometimes for years, and that's not a problem with oils, but we've just got to make sure the consistency is right. So yes, once this lockdown is over, I would say at the moment, of course, my staff are off for obvious reasons. And so we can't complete the project, but I promise you, I want them out there as soon as I can anyway. I'm also a watercolorist. And you could probably see that if I've achieved something with oils, which I like to think I have, the one big other item that's missing in my life as a paint maker, of course, would be to produce a watercolor. I don't have ambitions to make acrylic paints in terms of all the colors, simply because I'll be honest, I'm selfish. I am not an acrylic painter. Painting in acrylics just don't do it for me. I can't work with that speed of drying, and I just find that the color intensity is not there, as I've explained, and so it's a personal thing for me. Watercolors. I'm also adding 1 or 2 oils to the range. In fact, I'd love to, because we've been able to explore quite a lot of new pigments which are going to be in the watercolor range. We've played around with them on an experimental level into oils, so there'll be a few more new ones coming. I'd love to add about another 20 colors to the oil range at some point.
Wow. Is the process of making oil paint very similar to the process of making watercolor paint in the way that you source the materials and bind them and so on?
Yes, I mean, of course, the base material of a watercolor is fundamentally different. You're working with gum arabic, which of course is water-based, water-soluble, and a whole load of other items, which, including honey, which gives elasticity, numerous things. A watercolor is far more complicated, if you like. I know this sounds a bit like paint makers jargon now, as a system, in terms of the ingredients that you're going into a watercolor. We even have to have stuff in there to stop it going moldy, because all the horrible, I won't say the word viruses, but all those mold spores which are in the environment constantly, they love to eat things like gum arabic, and so that's what I have to put. Very similar to sort of the stuff that's put in as a food preservative in food. With an oil paint is about as simple as you can get. It's just 2 or 3 ingredients, and that is it, which allows me, of course, as I said, to get the pigment load very high. And of course, the more ingredients you have to be looking at putting in, I think I saw, looking at some of the formulations for the watercolors, 1 or 2 of them are in the sort of 60%. I noticed with cadmiums, the sort of 60% cadmium pigment, which is great, because you want as much pigment in there as you can, because it gives that zing to the eye, and of course it's the ingredient which is responsible for the light fastness. So the more pigment you can get in, the more it has a way of defending itself against the UV light. And that's the same with an oil as well. If you dilute very thin layers of paint, say a pink or something like that, where you've separated your pigment particles, it means those pigment particles are far more vulnerable to the UV light, which of course is the part of the light that's ultimately responsible for the breakdown and the fading of color. So yeah, it's a very exciting time, although tormenting, because we can't complete many projects. So the watercolors, I've been on it now for years. I've been formulating now for, when I think about it, probably the best part of 20 years I've been playing around with them. And it's only the last 5 or 6 years we've actually really been, the physicality of making them, we grind in the same way as we do the oils on on 3 roller stone machines, the ones you saw, Peter, when you visited.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you actually saw my guys grinding watercolor that day, I believe, wasn't it?
I thought I saw sort of yellow being made. I think an Indian yellow description.
Yeah, beautiful. So yes, it's we pass them over the mills several times to make sure we get the pigment particles dispersed nicely and uniformly and all the rest of it. But very exciting. And I mean, actually, I can show you a painting that. Just bear with me a second.
Go for it. I'm going to put my power on actually because I realise my battery's almost run out. So check that on.
This is a watercolor which was painted by a friend of mine, an American artist called Kwang Ho.
Oh yeah, fabulous artist! Wow.
You know him. I'm just trying to get it so it doesn't shine. And he just did this sitting on his lap, doodling away. He just made a guy's face up, and he immediately was going, "Wow, I can't believe the depth of the color, the deepness of it, the darkness." And I mean, I can also get one of mine. In fact, I could probably, if you hang on there, I know we'll have to edit this. I can show you back in a second.
And while he's gone, we can look at all the lovely things that are on his mantelpiece. Looks like some birthday cards and some candles. Nice work of art. Makes my studio look a bit scruffy, doesn't it?
I know it's one of those things. It's sort of working from home like this. This is a Michael Harding watercolor. I'm trying to get it.
Wow.
And a lot of people, when I've shown them photographs, they think that's an oil. The funny thing is, for me, I tend to find that I'm painting nowadays. I make my watercolors look like oils, and my oils look like watercolors. So I don't quite know what's going on there. But so that's Michael Harding watercolors.
Wow, that's fantastic, Michael. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's one of those things. The more I sit and look at it, the more I want to get it out of the frame and keep working on it. But that's how it goes. Yeah. So I would show you an oil painting, but it's one of those stages at the moment where it's sort of like I'm not sure where it's going. So another day.
So your watercolors will be like your oil paints. They will be the best on the market. They'll be fantastic out there. Why are yours? But why are yours better than the rest? I mean, I know the oils because I use them, and you've got the strength and the purity of pigment, and it's packed full of the good stuff. Is the same true for your watercolors?
I believe so. The feedback I've had from the artist friends who've tried them, and I must get you to some, has been the same reaction. It's like I get the same things being said about the watercolors as people said about the oils as they tried them. Like, wow, I can't believe the intensity and things like that. Kwang, for instance, he used the same words. And okay, why? I don't understand it. I mean, I just make the paint the best way I can in terms. Okay, the pigment load, yes, that's the physics of it in terms of putting good stuff in to do good things, keep the light fastness and all the rest of it. But the textural thing, I don't know why. I just make it like I can. I mean, it's very much like asking a chef why he makes something taste the way he does, and he'll say, "Well, I like it that way," and that's it for me. It baffles me why. I know this might sound terribly arrogant. I don't understand why the paint makers make their things the way they do, because it doesn't work for me, and that's really why I got into paint making.
Do you think that comes from your point of view because you're I suppose first and foremost you were an artist, you were one of us, you were a guy that used the paint. So do you think that's giving you that incredibly unique insight when you're in your colour mill? You know exactly what the paint needs to be at ground one because you know exactly what it needs to do at the end product.
Yeah, I have to say, thank you for the flattery. Yeah, that's all it can be. Fortunately, I can wear two hats, that of the artist and that of the paint maker. I don't understand it. It really baffles me. And it's one of those things. It's a bit like if you're riding along on a bicycle and you start to analyze how can you balance, you're probably going to fall off. And it's one of those things. I don't like to think about it too much because I might fall off the bicycle paint making, as it were. Yeah. It might all fall apart and go wrong. I just keep making the paint in the way I like it, and it seems that you guys like that as well.
It's a bit like I find a similar relation when I try and put paintings that I love and admire by other artists, if I try and put it into words, and it gets to a point where I just can't put it into words, and if I could, then it wouldn't be worth painting. It
Yeah,
just sort of
exactly.
it goes to that next level.
But it's also, it's that weird magic. You know, when I talked about earlier on about the artistic process, the elusive thing of art, and it's not a definitive commodity that we can. It's not like you can turn a tap and out comes the art. Um, it's there when you're not looking for it, and you
Mm,
must think about it. You've got to put it out of your head. It's the most bizarre psychological game. We've got the torment of a consciousness, which sort of gets in the way, but at the same time, you have to have that to allow it to happen anyway. It's sort of
mm.
almost contradictory. It's really quite bizarre, but it's what I call the magic. And if it ain't bust, don't fix it. It's sort of, I think that's probably why children are naturally very good artists, because they're not thinking about it.
Yeah, it just flows from them. They don't overthink it.
No, and they're not vain either. They're just doing it. You know, they're not sort of
Well,
thinking, what are people thinking of me? They're looking over my shoulder, and in this, you know, it doesn't look like a man. It's they just don't care.
yeah. Well, Michael, it's been absolutely magic talking to you. And I know that, I mean, you and I have talked like this for hours, and I know we could talk for hours more, and I'm sure people would love to hear us. But there is one other final question which gets
Sure.
asked. I'm sure you get asked it a lot, and it must be one of those tedious questions, but I was asked quite a few times. Do you, Michael Harding, have a favourite colour?
All of them. No, joking.
It's like choosing one of your babies, isn't it? Which one of your babies is the favourite? I suppose you could look at this in two ways. Do you have a favourite colour as with your manufacturer hat on, and do you have a favourite colour with your kind of artist hat on?
Ooh, yes, no. I mean, usually my favorite color is the one that if I'm making it, or one of my guys is, that tends to be the favorite because I'm there looking at it, and it's always a wow moment. Um, Gosh, there's so many different aspects to it. Lapis is wonderful because, of course, it's romantic and beautiful in its own right. Rose madder again, but then rose madder, of course, isn't as light fast as we'd ideally like, compared to the other modern pigments. But it's beautiful. It's got that depth of transparency and the fruitiness again. I have to use that word. Of course, the stacked lead white, in terms of being an authentic, ropey-looking, wonderful paint, is you know, it was a building block for the old masters, and so I feel I've achieved something with that in terms of being able to make something which is completely authentic.
Mm.
I don't know. I suppose ultramarine blue, not the lapis, the actual modern one.
That's what I was. That's one of my favourites. There's something gorgeous about that colour, and ever since I was a child, it was looking at things like, you know, Van Gogh's Starry Night,
Yeah.
or looking at even porcelain, the way that sort of colour is being incorporated into ceramics. It just has such a royal richness to it.
It does what it's meant to do. It just is blue. It's, as it says on the tin, blue. Yeah, and it's the, after the whites, of course, it's the bestseller. I think just about everyone's range is, because it's just universal blue, if you like. It has a mesmerizing effect. If you ever see the dry pigment, it's quite hypnotic. Yeah, it's wonderful stuff. It has a weird relationship next to other colors, and particularly when you put if you've got a very vivid painting, say a sky with ultramarine, and you put it in a gold frame, there's a resonance that exists between real gold, particularly. That's why when you look at things like Titian's, and a lot of those, some of those are painted in tempera, which of course have even often more luminosity. But that relationship with the gold frame is another essential thing. And I think sometimes it's best not to understand these things about why. Sometimes it is essential to understand. Sometimes it's important not to find out.
Just got to come from the heart. It's just got to come.
It's like trying to analyze love. If you analyze love, it's not there. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But when you stop thinking about it, then love is automatically back. yeah, it's just magical. Yeah.
Well, it's been a magic dream to chat to you today. It's so good to see you safe and well over in the States.
Great to see you. And I keep on seeing some very impressive looking paintings behind you, Peter.
Yeah, well, I've got some. There's a version of me there. So yeah, I'm going to keep busy painting, and I've got all my oil paints. I'm going to just do a quick. I'm going to show you. See that I am true to my ambassador. Look at that, folks. Look at all that.
And I like the way you're storing them. That's excellent. So that the oil, if there's any oil separation, it'll go to the top, the folded end. That's clever. I like that.
Yeah, so and it looks nice and pretty as well. It makes me feel a bit like a proper artist having it all up there. So thank you very much. Let's all keep safe and well, and let's get you back to the UK so we can get our hands on these watercolors as soon as we can.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, let's face it, this is going to end. But in the meantime, I just hope everyone stays well and try and keep painting.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and I know we'll do this again very soon, no doubt.
You bet. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.